When I walked into my father's hospital room, there was a stranger sitting by his bed. She was holding a photograph, something old and faded, pulled from my father's wallet. On the back, in handwriting I recognized as his. A date and 3 words that changed everything. My daughter. I was his daughter. The only daughter. Or so I'd believed for 58 years. How do you breathe when the foundation of your entire identity cracks open? How do you stand when the ground beneath you turns to quicksand? The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and the peculiar staleness of long illness, a smell I'd come to know intimately over the past 6 months. Machines beeped their steady rhythm, monitoring my father's failing heart, his failing lungs, his failing everything. The IV dripped medication into his veins. The oxygen machine hissed softly, and this stranger sat in the chair where I'd kept vigil for 2 weeks straight, holding proof that my life might be built on lies. My name is Denise, and until that moment, I'd known exactly who I was, Robert Mitchell's daughter, only child. The center of his universe, or so I'd always believed, sole heir to a modest fortune and a lifetime of certainty. But the woman in that chair, maybe in her 40s, maybe mid-40s, it was hard to tell, with eyes that looked disturbingly familiar when she turned to face me, was holding evidence that everything I believed was fiction. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside the window, the city sprawled under gray November clouds. Inside this room, time seemed to stop. The doctor had stopped me in the hallway just 10 minutes earlier. Dr. Patel, the oncologist who'd been managing my father's care since the diagnosis 6 months ago. She'd asked me to step into a small consultation room, the kind with uncomfortable chairs and boxes of tissues strategically placed on every surface. "Miss Mitchell, we need to have a serious conversation about your father's prognosis." Her voice had been gentle but firm, the voice doctors must learn in medical school for delivering news that will shatter people's worlds. I'd known what was coming. You don't watch someone waste away from pancreatic cancer without understanding where it's heading. He has perhaps 2 to 3 weeks left. Dr. Patel had continued, her dark eyes full of professional compassion. Maybe less. The cancer has metastasized throughout his liver and lungs. At this point, we're focused entirely on comfort care. It's time to start making arrangements, contact the funeral home, talk to his lawyer about the will, get his financial affairs in order. And if there are family members who need to say goodbye, if there are things unsaid between you, conversations you've been putting off, now is the time. Don't wait. 2 to 3 weeks. The words had hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting them. My father was 64, too young to die, but cancer doesn't care about age or fairness or the fact that I still needed him. I'd nodded numbly, thanked Dr. Patel for her honesty and her care, and walked back toward my father's room, with tears already burning behind my eyes. My mind had been racing with logistics. Call Marcus, my husband, call Uncle Tom in Arizona, call the lawyer, call the funeral home. But underneath the practical thoughts was a deeper current of grief. My father was dying. The man who'd raised me, shaped me, loved me unconditionally for nearly 6 decades, was leaving me. I'd been planning what to say to him when he woke up. How to tell him I loved him one more time. How to make these last precious weeks count. How to say goodbye to the person who'd taught me everything important. How to be strong, how to be kind, how to face hard truths with courage. And then I'd pushed open the door and seen her. She looked up when I entered, and for a frozen moment, neither of us spoke. The photograph trembled slightly in her hand. She was holding it carefully, almost reverently, between her thumb and forefinger, like it was something precious and fragile. My father's worn leather wallet lay open on the bedside table, its contents scattered across the surface: credit cards, insurance cards, a few dollar bills, receipts. She'd been going through his things without permission, without invitation, without any right whatsoever. "Who are you?" I demanded. My voice came out harder than I'd intended, sharp, with shock and territorial anger and fear. This was my father's room. My vigil, my grief. What right did this stranger have to invade this sacred space? "What are you doing in here?" She stood slowly from the chair. My chair, the one I'd been sitting in for hours every day, and I noticed she was taller than me by several inches. She wore faded jeans with a small tear at the knee and a worn sweater with a stain on the sleeve, like she'd spilled coffee and tried to wash it out, but it hadn't quite come clean. Working-class clothes. Thrift store clothes? Maybe. Her face was guarded, her posture defensive, shoulders squared like she was bracing for a fight. "I could ask you the same question," she said. Her voice was cold, controlled, with an edge of something I couldn't quite identify. Anger? Pain? Bitter triumph? All three? "But I already know who you are. You're Denise Mitchell, Robert Mitchell's legitimate daughter, the one he kept, the one he raised." Legitimate. The word hung in the air like smoke from a fire, acrid and suffocating. It implied there was another category. An illegitimate daughter. A daughter he hadn't kept or raised. "I don't know what you think you're doing here," I said, stepping further into the room, my hands clenched into fists at my sides, my heart pounding. "But you need to leave, right now. Before I call security and have you escorted out of this hospital." She didn't move, didn't flinch. Instead, she held up the photograph, tilting it so I could see the image clearly. "Do you know what this is?" "I don't care what it is. That's my father's private property. You have no right to go through his personal belongings. Put it back in his wallet and get out of this room." "It's a picture of me," she interrupted, her voice rising slightly, cracking on the last word. "Age 5. At a birthday party, my mother threw for me with money she could barely afford to spend. She worked double shifts for a week to buy that cake, those decorations. And on the back of this photograph, in Robert Mitchell's handwriting, it says my daughter. So I'll ask you one more time. Do you care to explain that?" My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. The room seemed to tilt. I looked past her to my father, lying motionless in the hospital bed. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow and labored through the oxygen tube in his nose. He looked so small, so fragile, so diminished. Nothing like the tall, strong man who taught me to ride a bike and drive a car and stand up for myself in a world that didn't always treat women fairly. The man I thought I knew. The man I thought was mine alone. "My father would never," I started, but my voice cracked and broke, because even as I said it, doubt was creeping in. How well did I really know him? How much of anyone's life is truly visible to those around them? Never what? Have an affair? Father a child out of wedlock? Abandon that child and pretend she never existed? She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that made me flinch. It echoed off the sterile hospital walls. "I have news for you, Denise. He did all of those things, and I'm the proof standing right in front of you. I'm the daughter he threw away so he could keep you." I wanted to scream at her, wanted to physically throw her out of the room, wanted to call hospital security and have her arrested for trespassing, for disturbing a dying man, for shattering my world, but something in her face stopped me cold. Not triumph, not cruelty, just a deep, bone-weary sadness that somehow mirrored my own grief, my own fear, my own sense of the world tilting on its axis. And her eyes. Now that I was looking at her directly, really seeing her, there was something disturbingly familiar about her eyes. The shape, the color, they looked like my eyes, like my father's eyes. "Who are you?" I asked again, quieter this time, my anger giving way to a terrible, creeping dread. "My name is Angela Price, and Robert Mitchell is my father too. Whether you want to believe it or not, whether he wants to acknowledge it or not, I'm his daughter, his first daughter, actually. I was born in 1961, 3 years before you were, which means I'm 58 years old. And I've spent every single one of those years knowing my father existed but wanted nothing to do with me." The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the bed to steady myself, my legs suddenly unable to hold my weight. The metal railing felt cold under my palm. "That's impossible. My parents were married for 42 years before my mother died. My father loved her. He was devoted to her. He was faithful. Everyone said so at her funeral. Everyone talked about what a devoted husband he was." "Was he?" Angela's voice was gentler now, almost pitying. "Or is that just the story you tell yourself, because the truth is too ugly to face? Because accepting that your father was capable of abandonment and betrayal would mean everything you believe about him, about your family, about your childhood, is a lie?" I couldn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't know. How could anyone really know what happened in the private spaces of someone else's marriage? Marriages were like icebergs, only a small portion visible above the surface, the real substance hidden beneath. My mother had died 6 years ago, complications from lung cancer, despite never having smoked a day in her life. One of those cruel ironies. In her final days, morphine-hazed and drifting in and out of consciousness, she'd said things, cryptic, rambling things about forgiveness, about secrets better left buried, about the weight of choices made long ago, about how sometimes love meant accepting what you couldn't change. I thought she was confused, the medication talking, her mind unraveling as her body failed. But what if she'd been trying to tell me something? What if she'd known about Angela? What if she'd lived with this secret for decades? Angela stepped closer, holding out the photograph. Her hand was shaking slightly. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to stake some claim on his estate or take anything that you think belongs to you. I didn't come here for money or inheritance. I just wanted to meet him before he dies, before it's too late. And I wanted to know if you knew about me. If our father had ever mentioned my existence, ever felt guilty enough to tell you the truth." I took the photograph, with numb fingers. It was old, the colors faded to that washed-out quality photographs get after decades, a little girl, with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, standing in front of a cake ablaze with 5 lit candles. She was wearing a pink dress that looked homemade, slightly too large, like it was meant to be grown into. Behind her, barely visible in the background, partially obscured by shadows and the poor quality of the photo, was a man, tall, with broad shoulders and a familiar stance. I couldn't see his face clearly. It was turned slightly away from the camera, but something about the figure made my stomach twist with recognition. The tilt of his head, the way he stood, even in shadow, even decades younger, it was him. "When?" I whispered, unable to form a more complete sentence. My mind was reeling, trying to process, trying to reorganize everything I thought I knew into this new, terrible configuration. "When was I born?" 1961, August 12th. "If you want the exact date, when did the affair happen?" "It started earlier than that, from what I've been able to piece together from the things my mother told me before she died. Linda Price, my mother, started working as a secretary at your father's accounting firm in 1957. She was 21 years old, fresh out of secretarial school, excited to have a real job with benefits. He was 36, married, successful. They were together, in whatever way they were together, for about 3 years before I was born." She paused, her jaw clenching. "And then when she got pregnant with me, when she told him she was going to have his child, he ended it, just like that. Cut her off, gave her some money, not enough, never enough, told her never to contact him again, made it absolutely clear she'd be on her own, that we'd be on our own." I felt physically sick. The room was too hot, too small. I couldn't get enough air. 1961. I'd been born in 1964, which meant my father had been with Linda, had fathered Angela, while he was married to my mother, while he was building the life I'd always believed in, while he was constructing the perfect family portrait I'd grown up inside, never suspecting there was a whole other picture hidden behind it. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" I asked, grasping for any possibility that this was a mistake, a misunderstanding, an elaborate con. There were people who did that, wasn't there? Showed up claiming to be long-lost relatives, hoping for a piece of an estate. How do I know you're not just some opportunist who found out my father was dying and decided to make a claim? Angela reached into the pocket of her jeans and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn at the creases from being opened and refolded many times. The paper was soft, almost cloth-like from handling. "I had a DNA test done, not with your father directly. Obviously, I couldn't get close enough for that without revealing myself and having this conversation sooner than I was ready for. But I found Margaret Mitchell, your father's niece, through one of those genealogy websites. You know, the ones where people spit in tubes, hoping to find out they're descended from royalty." She unfolded the paper carefully. "I contacted Margaret through the site's messaging system, explained the situation, or part of it anyway. Told her I believed we might be related through her uncle Robert. She agreed to test with me. I think she was curious, or maybe she suspected something. Families have a way of sensing secrets, even when they're not spoken aloud." She handed me the paper. I unfolded it with shaking hands, smoothing out the deep creases. There were charts, graphs, percentages, genetic markers I didn't understand, columns of numbers and scientific terminology. But the conclusion was printed in stark black letters at the bottom. Angela Price shares approximately 25% of her DNA with Margaret Mitchell. Probability of half-sibling relationship through shared paternal grandfather, 99.7%. Probability of first cousin relationship, 0.2%. Probability of unrelated individuals, 0.1%. The numbers swam before my eyes. 99.7%. That was as close to certainty as science could get. I sat down heavily in the other chair, the one by the window that looked out over the city. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. Outside, life continued normally. Cars moved through streets 6 floors below. People walked on sidewalks, going about their day. Clouds drifted across the sky. The world carried on, oblivious to the fact that mine was disintegrating. "Why now?" I asked, my voice hollow, distant, like it was coming from someone else. "Why wait until he's dying? If you've known about him all these years, if you've had this DNA evidence, why not come forward sooner? Why wait until he's here? Until it's almost too late?" Angela sat back down in her chair, the one next to my father's bed. She looked at him for a long moment before answering, her expression complicated, anger and longing and grief, all mixed together. "Because I'm dying too." I looked up sharply, searching her face. She nodded slowly, her expression grim and resigned, and somehow peaceful all at once. "Ovarian cancer, stage 4, metastasized to my liver and lungs, and now my bones. They're giving me maybe 6 months, if I'm lucky. Probably less, if I'm realistic. I've been through 2 rounds of chemotherapy already, made me sick as a dog, lost all my hair twice, spent weeks too weak to get out of bed, and it's not working. The tumors keep growing. The doctors are talking about experimental treatments, clinical trials, but we both know what that means. It means they're out of standard options." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather or what she'd eaten for breakfast. But I could see the fear in her eyes, the barely controlled terror of someone facing their own mortality, the same fear I'd been seeing in my father's eyes for months. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it despite everything, despite the chaos she just introduced into my life. No one deserved that. No one deserved to face death at 58. "Don't be sorry. It's not your fault." Angela looked down at the photograph still in her hands, running her thumb over the faded image. "I used to hate him, you know. When I was growing up, when my mother was working 2 jobs just to keep us fed and housed, when I was wearing second-hand clothes from Goodwill and eating discount groceries from the day-old bin, when kids at school made fun of my shoes, or my lunch, or the fact that I didn't have a father, I'd think about him living in his nice house with his legitimate family, and I'd hate him with everything I had." Her voice was tight, with old anger, old pain. "I'd fantasize about showing up on his doorstep, ringing the bell during dinner, watching his face when he opened the door and saw me standing there. I'd imagine telling your mother everything, telling you. Ruining his perfect life the way he'd ruined ours. I had elaborate revenge scenarios, worked out in my head, different versions for different moods." "Why didn't you?" I asked. "My mother begged me not to. Every time I'd bring it up, and I brought it up a lot, especially as a teenager when the anger was eating me alive, she'd beg me not to. She said it would only cause more pain, that what was done and couldn't be undone, that some doors are better left closed, that his other family didn't deserve to be hurt for his mistakes." Angela's voice broke slightly. "She made me promise I'd never contact him, never disrupt his family, never tell you or your mother, and I kept that promise until she died." "When did she die?" 2 years ago, September 15th. Heart attack. Sudden. She was at work. She worked as a secretary at a law firm until she was 76, and she just collapsed at her desk, dead before the ambulance arrived." Angela wiped at her eyes. "She was only 78, should have had more years. But she'd worked herself into an early grave. Literally, 3 jobs for most of my childhood. 2 jobs well into her 70s. Never married, never even dated. As far as I know, I think she gave up on love the day he left her pregnant and alone." She paused, her throat working. "After the funeral, after I'd sorted through her things and dealt with her estate, which wasn't much, just debts mostly, medical bills and credit cards. I found a box, a cardboard box, hidden in the back of her closet. It had letters from him, a few photographs, canceled checks from the early years, evidence that he'd existed, that he'd known about me, that this wasn't all just some story she'd made up. That's when you started looking for him? That's when I gave myself permission to. The promise I'd made her was technically voided by her death, but it still felt like a betrayal somehow, like I was going against her wishes. But I also felt like I couldn't die. And by then I knew I was sick. I'd had my diagnosis without at least seeing him once, without asking why, without demanding some kind of answer, or acknowledgement, or apology. Angela turned the photograph over to look at the back again, at those 3 words that had upended my world. My daughter. He kept this all these years, carried it in his wallet. So some part of him remembered, some part of him cared, maybe, or felt guilty. I don't know which, maybe both. She handed me the photograph again. I looked at it more closely this time, forcing myself to really see it, studying the little girl's face, seeing now what I'd missed before, the resemblance, the shape of her eyes, the same shape as mine, the set of her jaw, the same as my father's, the way she stood, one hip cocked, slightly, exactly the way I stood in childhood photos. We looked alike, not identical, but similar enough that someone who knew to look would see it. Sisters, half-sisters, family. Did he take this picture? I asked, my voice barely audible. I don't know. My mother said he came to a few of my early birthdays, before I turned 6, and he stopped pretending altogether. I don't remember any of it. I was too young. Those early memories are just fog. But she kept things, his cards, a few letters, the checks he sent sporadically in those first few years. Proof that he'd existed, proof that I wasn't just making him up, proof that I had a father, even if he didn't want me. I turned the photograph over again. The handwriting on the back was definitely my father's. I'd seen it thousands of times, on birthday cards, on checks, on notes left on the refrigerator, on the letter he'd written me when I'd left for college, telling me how proud he was. My daughter, 2 words, but they changed everything. They meant Angela was telling the truth. They meant my father had a secret child. They meant everything I believed about my family was built on lies. What do you want from me? I asked. Not unkindly, just lost, trying to understand what came next, what I was supposed to do with this information. Angela met my gaze directly. Nothing. I don't want anything from you, no money, no apologies, no relationship, if you don't want one. I just wanted you to know the truth. I wanted someone else in this world to carry this knowledge, besides just me, because when I'm gone, and I will be gone soon, and when he's gone, there won't be anyone left who remembers my mother, who knows that she existed, that she struggled, that she loved a man who abandoned her. I can't bear the thought of that, of being completely erased, like we never mattered at all. I understood that need viscerally, the need to be witnessed, the need to matter, the fear of disappearing without a trace, of having your entire existence be forgotten, as if you'd never lived at all. I looked at my father, still unconscious, or perhaps just pretending to be, still oblivious to this confrontation happening at his bedside. Or was he? I noticed his eyelids were flickering slightly, the way they did when he was aware but not quite awake, when he was listening but not ready to engage. Had he been listening this whole time? Did he know Angela was here? Dad, I said softly, leaning forward, my voice gentle but insistent. Can you hear me? Are you awake? No response, just the steady beep of the heart monitor tracking his heartbeat, the hiss of oxygen flowing through the tube, the soft whir of the IV pump delivering morphine to keep him comfortable, the sounds of a life maintained by machines. I turned back to Angela, my mind racing, trying to process, trying to decide what to do next. I need time to process this, to figure out what it means, what to do with this information. This is a lot. I understand. She stood, carefully tucking the photograph into her pocket like it was something precious. I've intruded enough for one day. I'm sorry. I know this is terrible timing. I know you're dealing with enough without this, but like I said, I'm running out of time too. Wait, I said, surprising myself. The word came out before I'd fully decided to say it. How do I reach you? If I want to talk more? If I have questions? She looked surprised, like she hadn't expected me to ask. She pulled out a pen from her purse and scribbled a number on the back of a visitor's pass badge from the hospital's front desk. This is my cell. I'm staying at the Comfort Inn, about 3 miles from here. The one on Route 9, room 237. I'll be around for at least a few more days, until, she trailed off, not finishing the sentence. She didn't need to. After she left, closing the door softly behind her, I sat alone with my father for what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes. Time had become elastic, unreliable. The room felt different now, charged with secrets and revelations. I looked at the man in the bed, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, and wondered who he really was beneath the surface. I'd always taken for granted. Was he a loving father, or a coward who'd abandoned his first child? Was he faithful, or an adulterer? Was he the hero of my childhood memories, or the villain of Angela's story? Maybe he was all of those things simultaneously. Maybe people were too complicated to fit into neat categories of good or bad, right or wrong. Maybe we all contained multitudes of contradictions. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Loud in the quiet room, a text from my husband, Marcus. How's your dad doing today? Any change? Coming home for dinner? I'm making your favorite chicken parmesan. I stared at the message, unable to comprehend how the world could be so normal when everything had just exploded. How could Marcus be thinking about dinner, about chicken parmesan, when I'd just discovered I had a half-sister I'd never known existed? How could he be worried about favorites and routine, when the entire story of my family had just been rewritten? But of course he didn't know. He was still living in the world from this morning. The world where I was an only child, and my father was exactly who we'd always believed him to be. I typed back with numb fingers, staying at the hospital tonight. Something came up. Major. Can't explain by text. Don't wait up for me. The response came immediately. Everything okay? Is your dad worse? Want me to come? I can be there in 20. No. I mean, Dad's the same, but something else happened. I need to be alone with this for now. Need to think. I'll explain everything later. I love you. Love you too. Call if you need me. I'm here. I put the phone away and settled deeper into the chair, pulling the thin hospital blanket around my shoulders. It smelled like industrial laundry detergent. I was preparing for a long vigil. Because when my father woke up, and he would wake up, he had to wake up, we were going to have a conversation. A long overdue, brutally honest conversation about truth and lies and the daughter he'd abandoned 58 years ago. Hours crawled by. The light outside the window changed from gray afternoon to dusky evening to full dark. Nurses came and went, with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, adjusting medications, making notes on charts mounted at the foot of the bed. They moved quietly, respectfully, the way people do around the dying. One of them, a kind woman named Patricia with gray hair pulled back in a bun and gentle hands, brought me a blanket and a cup of coffee around 8 o'clock. You should go home and rest, she said softly, her voice full of compassion. You've been here all day. We'll call you if anything changes. You need to take care of yourself too. I can't, I said. Not tonight. I need to be here when he wakes up. We need to talk. She nodded understandingly, like she'd heard variations of this 1,000 times before. I'll make sure no one disturbs you. Press the call button if you need anything. After she left, I tried to rest, closed my eyes, and leaned back in the uncomfortable chair. But my mind wouldn't stop racing. Images kept flashing through my head. Angela's face, the photograph, my father's handwriting, the DNA test results, 99.7%. My mother on her deathbed, rambling about secrets and forgiveness, had she known. Had she lived with this knowledge for decades, this betrayal, this other daughter? I must have dozed off at some point, because I jerked awake to the sound of my father's voice, weak and raspy. Denise? I sat up quickly, the blanket falling away. Dad, you're awake. He was looking at me with confusion in his eyes, trying to orient himself. What time is it? Have I been asleep long? It's after midnight. You've been out most of the day. I pulled my chair closer to the bed, close enough that I could see every line on his face, every shadow under his eyes, every sign of the disease eating him alive. Dad, we need to talk about something important. Something in my tone must have warned him. His expression shifted, became guarded, almost fearful. The confusion cleared, replaced by wariness. About what? About Angela Price. I watched the name land like a bomb. The effect was immediate and devastating. The color drained from his face, already pale from illness, becoming almost translucent. His hands, lying on top of the white hospital blanket, clenched into fists, the knuckles going white. His breathing, already labored, became more rapid, making the oxygen tube hiss louder, making the machine work harder. The heart monitor started beeping faster, numbers climbing on the screen. 85, 90, 95. How? He started, then stopped, closed his eyes tight, like he could make this moment disappear. Swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. When he opened them again, they were wet with unshed tears. How did you find out? She was here, in this room. This afternoon, going through your wallet while you were sleeping. She showed me a photograph, one you've kept in your wallet for 53 years. He didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched out, broken only by the mechanical sounds of the medical equipment keeping him alive. The beeping of the heart monitor, the hiss of oxygen, the whir of the IV pump, the soundtrack of modern death. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I'm sorry." Sorry? I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice now. It burst through, like water through a dam. That's all you have to say? Just sorry? You had another daughter, Dad. A daughter 3 years older than me. You abandoned her when she was born. You let her and her mother struggle in poverty while we lived in comfort. You kept this secret for 58 years. You lied to me, to Mom, to everyone. And all you can say is sorry? The heart monitor was really racing now. A nurse stuck her head in, checking the alarm. I waved her away. "We're fine, just talking." She looked uncertain, but withdrew. I know. Tears were streaming down my father's face now, cutting tracks through the hollows of his cheeks. I know it's not enough. I know nothing I say will ever be enough. But what else can I offer you? I made terrible mistakes, Denise. Unforgivable mistakes. I was weak and selfish and scared, and I destroyed lives because of it. Tell me everything, I demanded, my voice hard, unrelenting. The whole truth. You owe me that much. You owe Angela that much. He took a shaky, painful breath, coughed. I helped him take a sip of water from the cup on the bedside table, holding the straw to his lips. His hands were shaking too much to hold it himself. Her name was Linda, he began, his voice rough. Linda Price. She started working at my firm in 1957. She was 21 years old, fresh out of secretarial school in Philadelphia. She'd grown up in a small town in Pennsylvania, wanted to make something of herself in the city. Beautiful, and smart, and full of life and ambition. And I was 36, married for 8 years, increasingly unhappy in that marriage. So you had an affair? Yes, I had an affair, but it didn't start that way. Or maybe it did, and I was just lying to myself about it. It started slowly, just friendly conversations at first, then coffee breaks together in the break room, then longer lunches at the diner down the street. Your mother and I were going through a very difficult time. We'd been trying to have children for years, with no success. 8 years of hoping and failing, and hoping again. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with either of us, but month after month, nothing happened. It was straining our marriage, making us both miserable. We stopped talking about anything real. Everything became about ovulation schedules and doctor's appointments and disappointment. He paused, coughing again. This time there were spots of blood on the tissue. I tried not to think about what that meant. Linda and I, we connected. She listened to me complain about my problems. She made me feel seen, valued. She laughed at my jokes. She asked about my day and actually cared about the answer. And eventually it became physical. We were together, in secret, for about 3 years. I rented a small apartment across town, told your mother I was working late on tax seasons and complicated accounts. I'd meet Linda there. Did you love her? He thought about that. I thought I did. Or maybe I just loved how she made me feel, young again, wanted. I told her I'd leave your mother. I meant it when I said it. I was planning to ask for a divorce, but then Linda got pregnant with Angela, and suddenly everything was real and terrifying. So you abandoned them. I panicked, he said, his voice breaking. I thought about what a divorce would mean, The scandal in our community, everyone knowing I'd been unfaithful, the judgment from our friends and church members, the hit to my business reputation. People didn't just shrug off affairs back then. It would have destroyed my practice, and I thought about starting over at 40 with a new wife and a baby, the diapers and sleepless nights and everything that comes with an infant, and I couldn't do it. I was a coward. So you abandoned them, I repeated, making him say it. I ended the relationship. I told Linda I couldn't leave your mother after all, that I'd made a mistake, that it was over. I gave her money, $5,000, which seemed like a lot then but wasn't nearly enough. I said I'd continue to provide financial support for the child, but that I couldn't be part of Angela's life, couldn't risk anyone finding out, couldn't risk the exposure. And then, what happened? Then, about a year after Angela was born, your mother got pregnant with you. After 8 years of trying, suddenly it happened. She was ecstatic. She said it was a miracle, a sign from God that we were meant to be together, that everything would be okay now, and I threw myself into being a good father to you, into being the husband your mother deserved. I tried to make up for my betrayal by being perfect going forward, by giving you both everything. Did Mom know about Linda and Angela? The question hung in the air. He was quiet for so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. The heart monitor beeped. The oxygen hissed. Outside, an ambulance siren wailed in the distance. Finally, I don't know for certain, we never discussed it, but looking back now, I think she must have suspected something. Maybe she even knew. There were times when she'd look at me with this sadness in her eyes, this knowledge, like she was seeing through me, but she never asked, and I never told. We both just moved forward, pretended everything was fine, built a life on top of the lie. The machines beeped, the oxygen hissed, my world kept shrinking and expanding, trying to accommodate these new truths. Did you ever see Angela? After you ended things with Linda? No, never. I sent money through a lawyer for the first 5 years. Monthly checks, not enough, never enough, but what I could manage without your mother noticing large withdrawals. And then Linda sent the money back one day with a note. She said she didn't want my guilt money anymore, that she'd rather struggle alone than accept anything from me, that every check was a reminder of what I'd done, and she couldn't bear it anymore. So the payments stopped, and I just tried to forget, to wall off that part of my life in some dark corner where I didn't have to look at it. But you kept the photograph. I kept the photograph. His voice was barely audible. Linda sent it to me on Angela's 5th birthday, his March 1966. No note, just the picture. A reminder. Maybe, or maybe, she just wanted me to see my daughter, to know what I was missing. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, so I kept it hidden in my wallet, in a secret compartment behind my license. A small piece of evidence that she existed, that I'd done this terrible thing. Sometimes I'd take it out late at night when I couldn't sleep, look at her face, and wonder what she was like. If she was happy, if she hated me. He was crying openly now, his frail body shaking with sobs. The heart monitor's beeping increased, jumping to 110. An alarm started to sound. The nurse came rushing in. His heart rate is too elevated, she said, checking the monitors. He needs to calm down. Whatever you're discussing needs to wait. No, my father said, with surprising force. We're finishing this conversation. Turn off the alarm. Mr. Mitchell, turn it off. I'm dying anyway. What difference does it make if it's today or next week? I need to finish this. I need to tell her everything. The nurse looked at me for guidance. I nodded. She silenced the alarm but didn't leave, hovering nearby with a concerned expression. She has cancer, Dad, I said, my voice hard, wanting him to feel the full weight of what his choices had wrought. Angela does. Ovarian cancer, stage 4, metastasized everywhere. She's dying. That's why she came here. That's why she finally broke her promise to her mother never to contact you. She wanted to meet you before it was too late. She wanted to ask you why she wasn't enough, why you threw her away like garbage. The beeping grew even more rapid. His face contorted with pain, not physical pain, or not only physical pain, but something deeper, spiritual pain. The agony of regret and lost chances and consequences finally arriving after decades of running. No, that's not. She's so young. She can't be. How old is she? 58. The same age as the lie you've been living. I need to see her, he said, trying to sit up, his weak arms shaking with the effort, his whole body trembling. I need to talk to her. Please, Denise, call her, tell her to come back. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her. He broke off, coughing violently. The coughs came in waves, each one seeming to tear through him. I grabbed a tissue and held it to his mouth, alarmed when I saw fresh blood spots on it, more blood than before. The nurse immediately stepped forward, checking his oxygen levels, adjusting the flow. He needs to rest, she said firmly. This is too much stress on his system. His oxygen saturation is dropping. I don't care, my father insisted between coughs. I need to see her. Denise, please, before it's too late. I looked at his desperate face, at the fear and regret written in every line, every hollow, every tear track. At the father I thought I knew, now revealed as someone far more complicated and flawed. And I found myself nodding. Okay, I'll call her, but you need to calm down. You need to let the nurse help you, otherwise, you won't be alive when she gets here. He settled back against the pillows, his breathing ragged, but slowing slightly. The nurse adjusted his oxygen flow, checked his vitals again, gave me a stern look that said this better be worth it, and finally left. I pulled out the visitor's pass, with Angela's number scribbled on the back, and dialed. My hands were shaking. It rang 5 times before she answered, her voice thick with sleep. Hello? Angela? It's Denise. I'm sorry to call so late, but my father is awake. He knows I know about you, and he wants to talk to you. He's asking for you. Can you come back to the hospital? There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her hesitation through the phone, the weight of 58 years of absence hanging between us. Are you sure? She finally asked. I don't want to make things worse. I don't want to cause him more pain. He needs this. I think you both need this. And honestly, I don't know how much time he has. Days. Maybe. Hours. Possibly. If you're going to see him, it needs to be now. Another pause, shorter this time. Okay, give me 40 minutes. I need to get dressed and find a cab. The motel's a few miles away. Thank you. I hung up and turned back to my father. He'd closed his eyes, but tears were still leaking from beneath his lids, running down into his ears. She's coming, I said softly. He nodded, unable to speak around the emotion, clogging his throat. We waited in silence. I texted Marcus an update. Still at hospital, Dad awake, having important conversation, might be here all night. Don't worry, he sent back a heart emoji, and here if you need me. The minutes crawled by. 12:47 a.m., 1:15 a.m., 1:28 a.m. I watched the clock on the wall, watched the second hand make its slow circuit, watched my father lie still, eyes closed, probably praying or reviewing his life or preparing for the conversation he'd avoided for 58 years. At 1:33 a.m., there was a soft knock on the door. Angela entered hesitantly, like she was stepping into a minefield. She'd changed into cleaner clothes, dark pants and a simple blouse, and pulled her hair back from her face. She looked nervous, scared even. Her hands were clenched at her sides. She looked at my father. He looked back at her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sounds were the machines keeping him alive. Then my father said, in a voice raw with emotion, Angela. Robert, she replied. Not Dad, not father, just his first name, formal and distant. A name that kept him at arm's length. Please, he said, gesturing weakly toward the empty chair on the other side of his bed, opposite from where I sat. Come closer. I can barely see you from here. My eyes aren't what they used to be. She approached slowly, warily, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt or attack. Like she wasn't sure if this was safe. I stood and offered her my chair. She sat, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I'm sorry, my father said immediately. I know it's inadequate. I know it's 58 years too late. But I'm sorry, for everything. For abandoning you, for not being there, for being a coward, for robbing you of a father, and robbing myself of a daughter. Angela's jaw clenched. Her eyes were dry but bright with suppressed emotion. Why? I need to understand why. Why weren't we enough? My mother loved you. She really loved you. I would have loved you. Why did you choose them over us? Because I was afraid, he said simply, brutally honest. Afraid of judgment. Afraid of losing my business, my reputation, my standing in the community. Afraid of starting over at 40. Afraid of being seen as the man I really was, weak and selfish and flawed. So I chose the easier path. The safer path. The path that let me keep pretending I was a good man. So, you let us suffer, instead. You chose your comfort, your reputation, your perfect life over our well-being. Yes, that's exactly what I did. And I've carried that shame every day since. Not that it matters to you, I know, my suffering doesn't undo yours. My guilt doesn't feed you, or house you, or give you a father. But I want you to know that I didn't just move on happily. It haunted me. You haunted me. Did I? Angela's voice was sharp with skepticism, with 58 years of absence given voice. Did you think about me when you were tucking Denise into bed at night? When you were at her school plays and piano recitals? When you were teaching her to drive and walk her down the aisle someday? Did you think about the daughter you'd thrown away like garbage? Every day, he said, and the raw honesty in his voice made me flinch. Every single day of your life. I'd see girls your age and wonder if you looked like that. Wonder what you were interested in, what you were good at, what made you laugh. Birthdays were the worst. I remembered your birthday, March 12th. Every year, I'd wake up on that date, and the first thought in my head would be Angela is 6 today. Angela is 13 today. Angela is 21 today. And I'd feel this ache, this emptiness in my chest. But I was too much of a coward to reach out. Too afraid of your anger, your hatred. You should have been afraid, Angela said coldly. You deserved my hatred. You earned it. I did. I do. But I was more afraid of facing it than of living with my guilt. So I stayed away. And by staying away, I guaranteed you'd have every reason to hate me. It's a special kind of cowardice, isn't it? The cowardice that creates the very outcome you're trying to avoid. The cowardice that turns fear into fact. Angela was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. Her voice shook. Do you have any idea what it was like, growing up knowing my father existed somewhere out there but wanted nothing to do with me? Watching my mother work herself to exhaustion trying to provide for us alone. Wearing clothes from thrift stores while kids at school made fun of me. Eating cheap food, never having anything new. Living in cheap apartments in bad neighborhoods where I was scared to walk home after dark. She leaned forward, her voice rising. Do you know what it's like to be told by your mother that your father loves you but just can't be with you right now? And to realize as you get older that it's a lie, that he doesn't love you at all, that he just doesn't want you. Do you have any concept of what that does to a child? To grow up knowing you're not wanted? No, my father admitted, his voice breaking. I can't imagine it. I can't fathom that pain, but I want to hear about it. Tell me everything. It's the least I can do. It's all I can offer you now. My attention, my witness. Tell me about the life I should have been part of. And so Angela told him. She told him about the first apartment she remembered, a one-bedroom in a rough neighborhood where her mother slept on the couch so Angela could have the bedroom. She told him about the elementary school where she was teased for her outdated clothes and free lunch tickets, how the other kids would make onking sounds when she walked by because her shoes were from Goodwill and didn't fit quite right. She told him about the jobs her mother worked, secretary during the day, waitress at a diner at night, cleaning houses on weekends, about how her mother would come home exhausted at midnight, her feet bleeding from standing all day, and still help Angela with her homework. She told him about the rare treats that felt like miracles, a new dress for school pictures instead of a hand-me-down, a birthday cake from a real bakery instead of a box mix, a trip to see a movie in an actual theater, about how she learned to be grateful for the smallest things because they were so rare. She told him about the questions she'd asked as a child. Where's my daddy? Why doesn't my daddy live with us? Why doesn't my daddy want to see me? She told him about the creative lies her mother had invented. He lives far away for work, he's very busy with important business, he thinks about you all the time and sends his love. She told him about the day when she was 12, and found some old letters in her mother's closet while looking for Christmas presents. Letters from him, saying he couldn't see her, couldn't be part of her life, that she needed to understand and not contact him. How she'd confronted her mother, demanding the truth. How her mother had finally admitted that her father had chosen not to be in her life, that he had another family. She told him about her teenage years, the anger and rebellion, the fights with her mother, the bad choices she made, the dangerous people she hung around with, all because she was furious at the world and didn't care what happened to her. How her mother never gave up on her, never stopped trying to reach her, until finally Angela pulled herself together in her 20s and got her GED and went to community college. She told him about her mother's death 2 years ago, how Linda had worked until the very end, right up until the moment her heart stopped at her desk, how she died with debts still unpaid and dreams unrealized, how at the funeral, only a handful of people came because Linda had been too busy working to make friends, too exhausted to have a social life. She told him about the cardboard box of mementos she'd found after, letters, a few photos, old checks with his signature, birthday cards he'd sent in those first few years before he stopped entirely. How seeing his handwriting, seeing concrete proof that he'd existed and known about her, had made it all real in a way it hadn't been before. And my father listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't make excuses, didn't try to defend himself or minimize what he'd done. He just listened and cried and said, "I'm sorry," over and over, until the words became almost meaningless, just sounds of grief and regret. They talked until dawn broke, painting the hospital room in shades of gray and gold. The first light came through the window, touching the machines, the chairs, their faces. A new day beginning as an old chapter was finally being written. My father told Angela about her mother, about the early days of their relationship, about what had drawn him to Linda. He described her laugh, her intelligence, her dreams of moving to the city and making something of herself. He told Angela how much Linda had loved her even before she was born, how excited she'd been about becoming a mother. He told Angela about his regrets, listing them one by one: regret for not being there when she was born, regret for missing her first steps, her first words, her first day of school, regret for all the birthdays and holidays and ordinary days he'd chosen to miss, regret for the relationship they could have had, regret for abandoning someone who deserved better. And slowly, as the hours passed and the sun rose higher, something shifted in the room. The anger didn't disappear. It was still there, still sharp and justified, but it made room for something else. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding, a recognition that people are complicated and flawed and often make terrible choices for terrible reasons. That hurt. People hurt people. That cowardice has a cost that compounds over decades. By the time the morning shift nurses started arriving, doing their rounds at 7 a.m., all three of us were exhausted. My father had dozed off mid-sentence, his medication finally pulling him under into restless sleep. Angela sat slumped in her chair, staring at nothing, her face wet with tears she didn't seem to notice. I felt hollowed out, emptied of everything except a bone-deep weariness. "Are you okay?" I asked Angela quietly, not wanting to wake my father. She laughed, but it was hollow, exhausted. "No, but I think I will be. Eventually, maybe. I got what I came for. Answers, acknowledgement, an apology. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't give me back the childhood I lost or the father I never had, but it's something. It's more than I had yesterday." "What will you do now?" "Go back to my motel. Sleep for about 12 hours. Try to process all of this." She looked at me with those eyes that were too much like mine, too much like his. "What about you? This has to be hard for you too. Finding out your father isn't who you thought he was. That your whole family history is different than you believed." "I'm still processing," I admitted. "It's strange. Part of me is furious at him for lying to me my whole life, for keeping this secret, for making me complicit in it without even knowing, but another part understands why he did it. Understands the fear and shame that kept him silent. And then I feel guilty for understanding, like I'm betraying you by not being angrier on your behalf." "You don't have to be angry for my sake," Angela said. "My anger is my own. Your relationship with him is separate from mine. You're allowed to love him and be disappointed in him at the same time. You're allowed to have complicated feelings." "I suppose, but it's not entirely separate, is it? Not anymore. This connects us now. whether we wanted to or not. She looked at me for a long moment, considering. I suppose it does. We're sisters. Half-sisters anyway. Sisters, I said firmly, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Not half, just sisters, if you want to be. Angela smiled for the first time since I'd met her, a real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her whole face. I'd like that. I never had siblings growing up, always wondered what it would be like. Neither did I, or at least I thought I didn't. We sat together in companionable silence for a while, two women united by blood and secrets, and a complicated love for a flawed man who'd failed them both in different ways. Eventually, Angela stood to leave. I should go, let you have some time alone with him, and I need to sleep before I fall over. Wait, I said. Let me give you my real number, and let me have yours, not just scribbled on a visitor's pass. I pulled out my phone. Maybe we can have coffee this week. Get to know each other a little. No pressure, no expectations, just two people talking. I'd like that, Angela said. We exchanged numbers, typed them carefully into our phones. Real connections now, not just emergency scribbles. Then she left, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, but somehow lighter than when she'd arrived. I stayed with my father, watching him sleep, thinking about secrets and lies and the complicated nature of family. About how the things we hide to protect ourselves often hurt others more than the truth ever could. About how fear makes cowards of us all. Around noon, my father woke briefly. Did I dream it? He asked groggily. Was Angela really here? She was here. You talked for hours. You told her the truth. He closed his eyes, fresh tears leaking out. Thank you for calling her. Thank you for giving me that chance. You should rest now. We'll talk more later. There isn't much later left, he said, but he closed his eyes and drifted off again. Over the next 2 weeks, my father's condition deteriorated rapidly in the way Dr. Patel had predicted. His lucid moments became fewer and farther between, scattered islands in an ocean of morphine-induced sleep. But whenever he was awake and aware, whenever his mind was clear enough to speak, he asked for Angela, and she came. Every single day, she came. Sometimes she came in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes late at night when the hospital was quiet and the hallways empty, but she always came. And they talked about everything and nothing, small things and big things, the past and the might have been. Angela told him about her job as a paralegal at a small law firm in the city, how she'd worked her way up from receptionist over 20 years. About the small apartment she lived in, just 1 bedroom, but it was hers, paid off, the first place she'd ever truly owned. About the few relationships she'd had over the years, none that lasted, none that led to marriage or children. About how she'd always been afraid of abandonment, so she left first before anyone could leave her. My father told her about the accounting firm he'd built from nothing and sold 10 years ago when he retired. About my mother and their complicated marriage, the good years and the hard years, the love that persisted despite the lies underneath. About his regrets, and there were so many regrets. And I sat there with them, witnessing this impossible reconnection, this healing that had come 58 years too late, but was still somehow precious. I watched my father try to be. In these final days, the father Angela had needed her whole life. And I watched Angela struggle between her justified anger and her human need for a parent's love, even one who'd failed her so completely. Dr. Patel pulled me aside one afternoon during the 2nd week. His organs are shutting down, the kidneys first, now the liver. It's time to officially call in hospice care, to transition him to comfort measures only. We're talking days now, maybe just hours. I nodded, numb to the news that I'd known was coming. I called Marcus, who came immediately and held me while I cried. I called my father's brother, Uncle Tom, who flew in from Arizona within hours. I called the funeral home to start making preliminary arrangements, casket, burial plot, service details, the logistics of death. And I called Angela, whose voice sounded small and scared when she answered. Is he? Not yet, but soon, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. The doctors can't say exactly, but if you want to see him again, you should come now. I'm on my way. We sat vigil together that night, Angela and I, one on each side of his bed. Marcus was there too, sitting quietly in the corner, offering silent support. Uncle Tom came and said his goodbyes, his old eyes wet with tears for his younger brother. The hospice nurse, a gentle woman named Claire, with silver hair and kind eyes, increased my father's morphine drip and quietly explained what to expect: the changes in breathing, the modeling of skin, the gradual shutting down of systems. Around 2 in the morning on a Thursday, my father's breathing changed, became slower, more labored, with longer pauses between breaths. Chain-Stokes breathing, the nurse called it. She checked his vitals and gave us a meaningful look. It won't be long now, an hour, maybe 2. You should say whatever you need to say. Angela and I moved closer, each taking one of his hands. They were cold now, the circulation failing. We spoke to him softly, not knowing if he could hear but needing to say the words anyway. "It's okay to let go, Dad," I said, my voice breaking. "We'll be all right. Both of us. We'll take care of each other." "I forgive you," Angela said, and I think she surprised herself with the words. "I don't know if that matters now, but I forgive you. You were weak and scared, and you made terrible choices, but you were human, just human, and in the end, you tried. That has to count for something." At 2:47 a.m., he took a final rattling breath that seemed to last forever, and then he was still. The machines registered what we already knew. The nurse checked for a pulse, confirmed what needed confirming, and gently closed his eyes. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly. "He's at peace now." Angela and I sat there in the sudden silence, still holding his hands, crying together. Our father was dead, and with him died all the possibilities for more redemption, for more time, for more conversations. But he tried. In those final 2 weeks, he'd tried to be the father Angela deserved. He'd told the truth. He'd apologized. He'd given her what she needed most: acknowledgement, recognition, and yes, even though it came impossibly late, love. The funeral was 4 days later. We held it at Wesley Memorial Church, where my parents had been members for 40 years. It was a small service. My father had outlived most of his friends, and the few remaining were frail themselves. Uncle Tom gave a carefully worded eulogy that spoke of my father's business success, his love for his family, his dedication to his community. He carefully omitted certain truths. It was a nice eulogy, a polite eulogy, a eulogy that told only half the story. Angela sat in the back row, not quite family, but not quite stranger anymore. A few people whispered, wondering who she was, why she looked vaguely familiar. One of my father's old colleagues asked me if she was a distant cousin. I didn't explain. It wasn't their business. They didn't need to know. This was between us. Angela, my father and me. After the burial, as the other mourners were leaving, heading to the church basement for the reception of lukewarm coffee and store-bought cookies, Angela and I stood by the grave. Spring flowers were starting to bloom in the cemetery, bright splashes of color against the green grass. Daffodils and tulips planted by the cemetery staff to make death seem less harsh. "He left you something," I said. "In his will. He amended it the day after you first came to the hospital. He called his lawyer from his hospital bed, made him come in with the paperwork right away." Angela looked surprised and wary. "What do you mean?" "Half? He split everything 50-50 between us. The house, the money from the sale of the business, his retirement accounts, everything. It's not much. He wasn't a wealthy man, especially after medical bills, but it's fair, equal. He wanted us to be equal in death, even though he'd made us so unequal in life." "I don't need his money," Angela said, but her voice lacked conviction. "That's not why I came. It was never about money." "I know, but take it anyway. Use it for your medical expenses. I know how expensive cancer treatment is, or for whatever you need, or save it for whatever comes next." He wanted you to have it. It was his way of trying to make amends, however inadequate. His way of acknowledging you as his daughter, officially, legally. Angela was quiet for a long time, staring down at the fresh grave, at the flowers we'd placed there. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, thank you. There's something else." I reached into my purse and pulled out the photograph, the one that had started everything, the 5-year-old with pigtails. "He wanted you to have this. Keep it, it's yours. And this." I handed her an envelope, sealed, addressed to Angela in my father's shaky handwriting. He'd written it 3 days before he died, when he could barely hold a pen, when Patricia the nurse had to help support his hand. Angela took the letter with trembling hands. "What does it say?" "I don't know. It's private. For you." She slipped it into her pocket carefully, like it was something precious. "I'll read it later, when I'm alone and ready." We stood there together, two daughters, united by loss and secrets, and a complicated love for a flawed man who'd failed them both in different ways, but had, in the end, tried to do better. "What will you do now?" I asked. "With the treatment, I mean. Are you still doing chemo?" Angela shrugged. A weary gesture. "The doctors want to try a different protocol. More aggressive, harsher side effects, but maybe better results. Maybe. They're not promising anything. But I'll try. What else can I do? I'm not ready to give up yet. I'd like to come with you, to the appointments. If you want company, if you don't want to go through this alone." She looked at me, genuinely surprised, her eyes widening. "You'd do that? Even after everything? Even though we barely know each other?" "You're my sister," I said firmly, meaning it more with each repetition. "Of course I would. Family shows up. That's what family does, even when it's hard, even when it's complicated." Angela smiled through her tears, a real smile that transformed her whole face. "I'd like that. Thank you. I've never had anyone come with me to treatments before. It would be nice not to be alone." Over the following months, Angela and I built a real relationship, slowly and carefully, like constructing something delicate that might break if handled too roughly. It wasn't always easy. There was too much pain in our shared history, too many gaps to bridge, but we tried. I accompanied her to chemotherapy sessions at the cancer center, holding her hand while poison dripped into her veins, reading aloud to her from books when she was too nauseous to focus on anything, bringing her ginger ale and crackers when she could finally eat. I sat with her in waiting rooms, waiting for test results, waiting for doctor consultations, waiting for news that was always bad or at best not terrible. She came to my house for Sunday dinners, where Marcus cooked his specialties, and we talked about everything and nothing. We filled in the gaps of our separate lives, pieced together the puzzle of our shared father and very different mothers. We discovered we both loved old movies, both hated cilantro, both had a weakness for mystery novels. Small connections, building into something larger. Marcus was wonderful about it all, accepting Angela into our lives without hesitation or question. "Family is family," he said simply. When I worried I was asking too much of him, when I felt guilty about the time and energy Angela required. "Blood or not, chosen or given, family is what we make it. Angela is your sister. That makes her my sister too. We show up for family." But the new chemotherapy protocol didn't work any better than the old one. By August, 4 months after our father's death, Angela's cancer had progressed significantly despite the treatment. New tumors in her lungs made breathing difficult. Metastases to her bones made every movement painful. The doctors gently suggested it was time to consider hospice care, to focus on quality of life rather than quantity. Angela agreed without argument, too tired to fight anymore. "I'm exhausted," she told me. "I've been fighting since I was born, fighting poverty, fighting abandonment, fighting to matter, fighting to survive. I'm tired of fighting. I just want to be comfortable now. No more needles, no more nausea, no more false hope, just peace." I helped her get settled into the same hospice facility where my father had died, a beautiful place with gardens and private rooms and staff who understood that death deserved dignity. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, that she would die in the same place as the father she'd barely known. I visited every day, just as I'd visited our father, and in the final weeks of her life, Angela and I had the chance to truly become sisters in a way that time and circumstances had stolen from us. She told me about her dreams, the ones she'd never gotten to pursue. She'd wanted to go to law school, to be a lawyer like the one who'd helped her mother navigate her rights as a single mother years ago. She'd wanted to travel to Ireland, to County Cork, where Linda's grandparents had emigrated from in the 1920s. She'd wanted to fall in love. Really fall in love, the kind that lasts. She'd wanted to get married, have children, build the family she'd never had. All the normal dreams that cancer and poverty and abandonment had stolen piece by piece. I told her about my life too, the good and the bad, the successes and failures, my 20-year marriage to Marcus, how we'd met at a bookstore and bonded over our shared love of historical fiction, my career as a high school English teacher, the students I'd helped, and the ones I'd failed, my 3 miscarriages and the children Marcus and I had never had, that empty nursery that was now a home office. We shared our regrets, our joys, our fears about death, and what might come after. And one afternoon in late October, as we sat in her hospice room watching the autumn leaves fall outside the window in shades of gold and red and orange, Angela pulled out the letter our father had written her. She'd carried it with her everywhere, but never told me what it said. "Do you want to know?" she asked, holding the worn envelope. "Only if you want to tell me." She unfolded the paper carefully, smoothing out the creases with gentle fingers. He apologized again, said he was sorry he couldn't be the father I deserved, sorry for all the years he'd wasted. He said he hoped I'd find some measure of peace before the end. But at the end, he wrote something that meant everything to me. She read aloud in a voice thick with emotion. "You are not defined by my failures. You are more than the daughter I abandoned. You are your mother's daughter, Linda's daughter, strong and resilient and brave. You survived and built a life despite my absence. That is not my doing. That is yours. That is all you. I am proud of you, Angela. I wish I'd had the courage to tell you that in person when I had the chance. But I tell you now, and I hope you can hear it. I'm proud of you. You deserved better than me, but you became someone wonderful anyway. That's all you." Tears streamed down both our faces, mixing with the afternoon light coming through the window. "That's beautiful," I whispered. "And it's true. You are strong. You survived things that would have broken other people." "We both did," Angela said. "We survived him, in our different ways. You survived learning the truth. I survived not having him. And here at the end, we found each other. That's worth something." "It's worth everything," I said. Angela died on a Saturday morning in early November, 6 months after our father, as the first snow of the season was starting to fall outside her window. I was there holding her hand, telling her she wasn't alone, telling her she mattered, telling her she'd made a difference in my life. Marcus was there too, sitting quietly in the corner, and Uncle Tom, who'd flown back when I called to tell him Angela was in her final days. He'd come to know Angela in those months, had accepted her as family, had grieved for the niece he'd never known he had. When her breathing stopped, when the hospice nurse confirmed she was gone, I felt something tear inside my chest. We'd had such a short time together, less than a year from the day she walked into my father's hospital room to the day she died. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was what we had, and I was grateful for every moment. I buried her next to our father, on the other side of his grave, from my mother. 3 graves in a row now. It felt right somehow, this family constellation. My mother on his right, the wife he'd been faithful to in action, if not entirely in heart. Angela on his left, the daughter he'd abandoned but never forgotten, and him in the middle, flawed and human, and remembered by all of us. At Angela's funeral, even smaller than my father's, I spoke. I stood at the front of the nearly empty church and told the handful of people gathered hospice staff, a few of Angela's co-workers, Uncle Tom, Marcus, about my sister's courage, about how she'd faced death, not once but twice, first our father's and then her own, with grace and honesty and unflinching clarity. I told them about how she taught me that family is complicated and messy and sometimes comes to us late, but is worth fighting for anyway, about how she'd shown me that even the worst mistakes can lead to unexpected gifts, like the sister I'd found too late but was grateful to have known at all, about how she'd proven that you're not defined by what's done to you, but by what you do despite it. After the burial, as I stood alone by the 3 graves, father, mother, sister, I thought about secrets and lies and the poison they spread through families, like slow-acting venom. I thought about how my father's choice to hide his past had robbed Angela and me of a lifetime as sisters, of shared childhoods and inside jokes and the comfort of sibling bonds. How his cowardice had cost us decades we could never get back. But I also thought about how, in the end, the truth had come out, how it had hurt. God, it had hurt, but had also healed in its way. How it had broken apart my illusions, but had given me something real in return. A sister, however briefly. A deeper, more honest understanding of my father as a full human being, not the saint I'd imagined, but not a villain either. A commitment to living with integrity and honesty, to choosing truth over convenience, to never hiding parts of myself or my life out of fear. I keep 2 photographs on my mantle now. One is the faded picture of 5-year-old Angela at her birthday party, the picture that started everything. Next to it is a newer photo from those final months, Angela and me sitting together in her hospice room, both smiling despite everything, despite the cancer and the lost years and the approaching end. Sisters, family. They're reminders of what was lost and what was found, of the cost of secrets and the value of truth, of the fact that family is complicated and messy and sometimes comes to us in unexpected ways at unexpected times, of the truth that it's never too late to tell the truth, even when the truth comes with unbearable costs. I miss them both terribly. My father, with his flaws and regrets and last-minute attempts at redemption, Angela with her strength and grace and hard-won forgiveness. But I'm grateful too, grateful for those final months when Angela and I built something real, grateful for the truth that set us free even as it shattered our comfortable lies, grateful for the understanding that even broken people deserve love, even imperfect relationships have value, and even the worst mistakes can lead to unexpected grace. The truth destroyed the life I thought I had, but it also gave me something precious, a sister, understanding, and the knowledge that even in the face of death and regret and decades of lies, there's still room for love and redemption and connection. And that, I've learned, is enough. It has to be enough, because it's all we have. The truth, however painful, however late, the truth that sets us free, even as it breaks our hearts. The truth that Angela existed, mattered, was loved. The truth that our father failed, but also tried. The truth that family is what we make it, even when we only have months instead of lifetimes. I visit the graves every week now, bringing fresh flowers, sitting on the bench nearby, talking to them about my life, about the world they've left behind. And sometimes, when the light is right and the cemetery is quiet, I can almost feel them with me, my father, my mother, my sister, my complicated, messy, honest family.